Hi all, welcome and welcome back to my channel. It's been 5 long years since 15-month-old Evelyn Boswell went missing from Blounteville, Tennessee, and was found lifeless, with aluminum foil wrapped tightly around her beautiful face, and a blanket wrapped tightly around her head, upside down, in a garbage can, in a playhouse that once belonged to her pathetic excuse for a mother on her grandfather's land. And it's been 5 long years for those of us who have followed her case, waiting for justice for baby Evelyn. Justice that finally came down on the head of her evil, twisted mother, Megan Boswell, after a jury found her guilty of 19 counts, including first-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, and providing false information to police.
To judgment of this court, you are guilty. In count 2, a jury of your peers having found you guilty of first-degree murder and the perpetration of a felony, it's a judgment of this court, you are guilty. In count 3, a jury of your peers having found you guilty of first-degree murder and the perpetration of a felony, it's a judgment of this court, you are guilty. In count 4, a judgment of your peers having found you guilty of aggravated child abuse, it's a judgment of the court, you are guilty. In count 5, a jury of your peers having found you guilty of aggravated child neglect, it's a judgment of the court, you are guilty. In count 6, a jury of your peers having found you guilty of tampering with evidence, it's a judgment of the court, you are guilty. In count 7, a jury of your peers having found you guilty of false report, it's a judgment of the court, you are guilty. In count 8, a jury of your peers having found you guilty of false report, it's a judgment of the court, you are guilty. In count 9, a jury of your peers having found you guilty of false report, it's a judgment of the court, you are guilty. In count 10, a jury of your peers having found you guilty of false report, it's a judgment of the court, you are guilty. In count 11, a jury of your peers having found you guilty of false report, it's a judgment of the court, you are guilty. In count 12, a jury of your peers having found you guilty of false report, it's a judgment of the court, you are guilty. Count 13, a jury of your peers having found you guilty of false report, it's a judgment of the court, you are guilty. Count 14, a jury of your peers having found you guilty of false report, it's a judgment of the court, you are guilty. In count 15, a jury of your peers having found you guilty of false report, it's a judgment of the court, you are guilty. In count 16, a jury of your peers having found you guilty of false report, it's a judgment of the court, you are guilty. In count 17, a jury of your peers having found you guilty of false report, it's a judgment of the court, you are guilty. In count 19, a jury of your peers having found you guilty of abuse of a corpse, it's a judgment of the court, you are guilty. And in count 20, a jury of your peers having found you guilty of failure to report a death under suspicious, unusual, or unnatural circumstances, it's a judgment of the court, you are guilty. In counts 4 through 20, the jury did not assess a fine, so there'll be no fine assessed in those counts. Now we'll be in recess about 15 minutes. Thank you.
We'll hear more from Judge Jim Goodwin once the jury is out of the courtroom there. We'll continue to watch and listen back in at this point.
All right. Ms. Boswell, in count 1, the jury of your peers having set your punishment, you'll be sentenced to life imprisonment. In count 2, you'll be sentenced to life imprisonment. In count 3, you'll be sentenced to life imprisonment. We'll have to set this for sentencing hearing where we'll deal with merger, other issues, as well as sentencing in counts 4 through 20.
Need to stop in there out of the criminal courtroom there. 3 counts of life, 3 life sentences, basically what the jury is recommending on those first 3 charges for the first-degree murder, felony murder, and second felony murder charge there. That would be life, we would understand, with the possibility of parole.
Yes, she has to serve a full 51 years before she'd be eligible for parole. If you count the 5 years, which we will count the 5 years she has already served, so she would be 69 years of age before she would be eligible to get out of jail. Now, that is the recommendation from the jury. The official sentencing will happen May 22nd at 1:30.
And that has to come from the judge. Then we also have to count the counts 4 through 20, the other charges that she was convicted of this morning as well. There will be sentencing that will come with those.
Along with fines.
And all of that will come together on that the May 22nd date there. So, but that is the recommendation from the jury, is the life in prison is what they've recommended for Megan Boswell.
So she will be eligible for parole is what we're learning. We will have much more coverage on the Megan Boswell verdict and the sentencing coming up on News 5 and, of course, online and on all our outlets.
After Megan Boswell was found guilty of murder, which I love saying, the prosecution and defense both spoke to the media about the outcome of the trial.
A lot of hard work by a lot of people, so it was very satisfying to get the jury's verdict.
Normally, we sometimes hear a victim impact statement in cases like this, and we didn't hear one this time. Maybe a little bit from Tommy Boswell, but it seems like you are the advocates for Evelyn. What do you have to say about that?
That's a complicated question, to say the least. Obviously, there are a lot of emotions in this case, you know, even within the Boswell family. I mean, you all saw Tommy testify. I mean, his daughter was the defendant. His granddaughter was the victim in this case. A lot of emotions. Same thing with Angela. So, you know, but we're fortunate, and I would be remiss without talking about the incredible work that was done by law enforcement in this case. And you know, as a community, could not be prouder to have those folks who really, from the get-go, from the time she was reported missing, who've really been her biggest advocates during these 5 years, to see, you know, ultimately what we realized here in the courtroom today, which was justice for Evelyn.
Even with that exhaustive investigation, all of the interviews, all of the forensic evidence that was gathered, you know, Ms. Massengill even acknowledged we still may never know exactly what happened. Did you have to rely on the jurors' common sense and taking might be a shred of doubt and separating that from what reasonable doubt is in this case?
To some extent. I mean, I think, always coming from a prosecutor, it's I guess easy to say, well, you know, we think you should decide the case this way. But this really was, you know, a textbook example of, you know, just excellent police work. You know, for us to be able to come into the courtroom, to be able to present a case where you really don't have direct evidence. I mean, we didn't have a confession. You know, we didn't have a video of the crime being committed. You know, he had to rely on a lot of circumstantial evidence, and, you know, as we argued during closing argument, you're going to have to use your common sense to fill in some of those gaps that were there. So, yes.
General Massengill, during closing, you talked about the baby. Baby Evelyn mattered. Where'd you come up with that?
Because it's the truth. She mattered and she deserved to live, and I wanted the jury to know that.
How hard was it working on this case and seeing all those images, the baby in the trash can?
It's very difficult, and it's difficult to show something like that to a jury or to the public, but it's important that we show everyone what Megan Boswell did. It's difficult, but we're willing to do it to find justice.
Can you talk about the impact that, you know, this community has said these questions for 5 years now and finally have answers?
Right, and I think that was difficult. You know, unfortunately, we made some very purposeful decisions as we were prosecuting the case, which I think a lot of people kind of took umbrage with. You know, we did not release much about this case on purpose because we wanted to try the case here in Sullivan County. And I think that caused a lot of heartburn among people not to have those answers, not to know that information about the case. And we, you know, kind of told them just to be patient because we wanted to try the case in the courtroom. And we feel like that's what we did.
Was there a piece of evidence or something that you think really sealed the deal for the jurors on making this decision?
I don't know that there was any one singular piece of evidence. I think the difficult thing in this case really is those interviews with Megan and the fact that, you know, her story kept changing, kept shifting. And, you know, there were lots of little things, you know, that kind of ruled other things out. But I think ultimately, you know, it was a lot of her own words that were her undoing in this case.
And what about how the baby was found? That is something that I think has hit home, and you could tell from day one, from the images you showed, jurors were crying, she was crying.
Right.
What do you want to talk about when it comes to that?
I mean, it's disturbing. I mean, it truly is. And, you know, we made a decision in trying this case because, you know, there were a lot of charges. Obviously, the lies and stuff that she was telling the jury. We didn't want the focus of the case to be on that. I mean, to us, that was the easy kind of low-hanging fruit, so to speak. We wanted the focus to be on the homicide. We wanted it to be on Evelyn and what happened to her. And that was why we kind of hit the jury right in the face right out of the gate. And so, you know, like I said, that was strategy on our part as far as, you know, how we kind of put the trial together. We wanted them to, right from the get-go, know that this was a homicide case. This wasn't just a somebody lied to the police case.
Megan will be eligible for parole when she's about 69 years old. As a prosecutor team, you asked for life without the possibility of parole. What is your take now that the jury decided to give her a chance?
You want to answer it?
We will continue to fight to keep her in custody until, for her natural life, if possible.
Can she face more years than that, though, with the other charges that she received?
She can. The judge will still have to sentence her on all the false report counts, the tampering, the abuse of a corpse, the failure to report charge. So in theory, he could run those consecutive and he could stack that time on top of what she's already received for the homicide.
Is
so
that something you all get to urge him to do in
we
your
do.
sentencing report?
We do. There'll be a sentencing report and then we'll have a sentencing hearing. That's what's set the end of May, and then we'll go from there. Both sides will have a chance to argue what her sentence should be on those.
Do you know how many years she looks at for those additional charges, too?
Yes, the false reports should be looking at 2 to 4 years on those. The tampering charge will be 3 to 6, and I think the abuse of a corpse and the failure to report are both 1 to 2 years on those.
I know that law enforcement, even one of the agents or one of the people that testified said that everyone else was ruled out, including Hunter Wood. But clearly, whether it was in the community or certainly on the defense's strategy, that was an if that they wanted to put out there. How important were those text messages that you guys were able to put up, showing what was going on, what apparently was going on, at least in Hunter Wood's mind, as this child was now known to be missing?
All right, you want to comment?
I think they're very, very important. I don't know how you can overcome that in my mind. When we found those, I don't know there's an explanation, for them.
Was there anything else y'all want us to know? I know it's been a very long, almost 2 weeks.
Well, like I said before, I mean, I think, if the community ever had any doubt about how hard law enforcement works, I hope they had a chance to see that in action in this trial, because like I said, you really could not have asked for any more diligent, exhausting efforts than what we saw from our local law enforcement here at the Sullivan County Sheriff's Office, TBI, FBI. I mean, it truly was a coordinated effort.
Is this the first time in a while, too? I know that the judge mentioned it, but for you all, that a jury has been sequestered?
It was. I don't know that I was part of the last one, but I know it's been about 20 years since the last time we sequestered a jury. So, anything else?
Thank you.
Oh, thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Asking that jury to show some mercy and some clemency and saying that she felt like Megan Boswell was redeemable. Talk about that interview that she gave for you and her knowledge of Megan's character.
Well, obviously, Gail spent more time with her than I have in that type of situation. Most of my conversations, all of my conversations with Megan have been sitting in a jail cell talking about her case, but she seems to be a very positive person. She seems strong in her faith, and she's going to handle this, and she seems like she'll move through this adversity. She will have a chance to get out of prison when she's 69.
Yeah, I mean, did you feel like that was a win today, though? Being able, that she will possibly get out of prison
I would say that it obviously it was better than a life without sentence. Assuming she lives to be 69 years old, she will be released. So maybe she'll have some time at the end of her life to enjoy.
Is there something about cases that are this horrifying and go on for this long and get this much community attention that raises the possibility of a feeling of retribution in the community being higher than it might otherwise be?
Well, certainly, if you look at the comments on the news articles, Facebook comments, people seem to be very much up in arms over this case. It's a sad case. I know I've been criticized a lot in the media because of defending Megan, but everyone's entitled to a defense, and that's what I hope I provided her. I tried to do that to the best of my ability.
It sounds like that's something you're not stopping today.
Absolutely not.
You decided to pull 3 witnesses for this part of the trial. Why did you decide to do that, then, and talk about why you decided to bring Angela up?
As far as today was just witnesses, there are 2 phases of the trial, and all witness testimony has to be relevant. So these witnesses, their testimony wouldn't have been relative to guilt or innocence, but it was relevant to sentencing. Her mom, to her credit, come up here and testified that she wasn't a good mother. And I respect her for that, because that had to be hard to go on TV and take that responsibility, but she did it.
Do you know if Angela Boswell knew that she had points out for her arrest?
I don't know that. I imagine yes.
Yeah, I think so. I'm going to double. You guys can go ahead.
Anything else you want to add?
I don't think so.
Okay. Can we
The defense co-chair, who worked pro bono and only came on the case a few short months ago, also chimed in, saying that the jury got the verdict wrong. And he came on the case to defend Megan, the baby killer, because he thought it was a case worth fighting for.
Shortly ago, we learned that Megan Boswell will be sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole based on the jury recommendations. Joining us live right now outside of the courthouse in Tennessee is our in-court TV legal correspondent Kelly Craft with defense attorney Tim Horn.
Hi there, Judge Ashley. Yes. So Tim Horn was part of the defense team. Tim, your reaction to the sentence? They're giving Megan Boswell a chance.
Well, that's the least they can do, given that they got the verdict wrong. I'm thankful. She is a human being. Somehow I think we've lost the value in human commodity in society sometimes, and this jury has said that they think she's worth saving. And for that, I'm grateful. But I'm disappointed that we got to that point of the trial.
Tim, you are a former prosecutor. You jumped into this case just a few months ago because you were thinking, and Gene Scott was thinking, this was going to be a big one, and he had been working on it for a number of years. Talk to me about your involvement.
Well, when Mr. Scott reached out to me, I anticipated way many witnesses of all kinds, and it was going to take a second set of eyes, and that was going to be necessary if they were going to effectively defend Megan. So when he asked me to help him out, I examined the case, looked at what he had been provided through discovery, and I thought it was a fight worth fighting.
You said you think it was a fight worth fighting. When you took a look at the facts in this case, a baby being thrown into the trash can, these are very gruesome details, but you still felt this is worth fighting for.
Well, some of this case and some of Megan's conduct is inexcusable. I don't pretend that we're going to stand up there and say that some of these things were defensible, but it didn't equate to murder. And I don't want to live in a society, I don't think anybody does, is when we start letting emotion and, grotesque details dictate outcomes of people's guilt or innocence. And it's sad, it's tragic, it shouldn't have happened, but it doesn't equate to murder.
The state had 2 medical examiners come to the stand. What did you think of that?
Well, if you believe the first one, you don't need the second one. I think they were a little more concerned with what the first one was going to say, and it appears that they brought in somebody else that had their mind determined of what she was going to testify to before she ever took the stand. And she's a very experienced courtroom testifier. This wasn't her first trial. We knew that she was going to be prepared for us, but she already come in with the determination that she was going to persuade this jury to believe her at all costs. But, I think even she avoided what those reports were saying, and she discarded them and put her opinion out there for the jury to hear. We thought we had covered that, but clearly the jury accepted what she said. I'm disappointed in that.
Because the medical examiners could never conclusively say that the baby was alive when that little baby Evelyn, was thrown into the trash can. And Gene Scott was asking the medical examiners about that.
Well, it's not only that they couldn't prove that whether she was alive or dead when she was placed in the trash can, they couldn't prove a cause of death. Dr. Schmidt clearly said that there was other options on the table, but none of those got us to this trial, and none of us got to Megan Boswell's benefit. They put their faith and hopes in the opinions that it was a murder. I don't think they ever established clearly a cause of death, but here we are.
Is that why defense counsel decided not to put on a case? Obviously, we both know it's the prosecutor's burden.
Well, we had some witnesses that we thought were going to be necessary, but as the state's case progressed and we come down to the two most credentialed witnesses that they had in the trial that were telling the jury that there could have been other possibilities for the cause of death, there was really no need to repeat that over and over. They heard it once. They reluctantly, from the second medical examiner, heard it twice. There's no need to go back there over and over.
Tim, Megan did not testify in the guilt phase, and she also did not testify in the penalty phase. Can you talk about that decision?
Well, ultimately, it's her decision, but I didn't think anything good was going to come from it. Clearly, they established that she's a liar, and I don't think anything she was going to say was going to be received by a jury or this community or anybody else, whether she said it in sincerity or not. I think people had heard enough from her, and she could do nothing that was going to help herself at this point.
Judge Ashley, our anchor back in the studio, has a question for you as well. I'll listen to it and then I'll repeat it to you. Judge Ashley?
Well, I was just first of all, thank you, Tim Horn, for being on with Kelly there. In hearing that they couldn't prove the cause of death, in a case like this, do you get concerned that it's the emotion of the jury that overrides some of the evidence that you feel like you presented?
In a case like this, she's asking, when the state was not able to prove a cause of death, do you feel that the jurors were more moved by emotions?
Well, yeah, and I think I argued that in sentencing, is that the emotion of this trial really began 5 years ago when this case kicked off and Megan was charged. And that emotional roller coaster has maintained a constant for the last 5 years. And I'm sure that weighed heavily on their mind. And I clearly think it was an emotional decision alone. I don't feel like they proved the case. But I think they voted their emotions and not the proof.
Tim Horn, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate your hard work.
Thank you.
All right, Judge Ashley, that's the latest from here. Obviously, two big decisions here in the Megan Boswell case. Guilty on every single count. And then, of course, the jurors decided to give her a chance. So she'll be behind bars for at least 51 years, and then she'll have an opportunity for a chance of parole.
When I heard his stupidity, I got all excited to tear him up in my video. Then I remembered his pathetic plea to the jury prior to them deciding sentencing recommendations for his baby killer client, asking them to show her compassion and mercy and love, things she didn't give to her own daughter, while she was wrapping foil tightly around her face so she couldn't breathe, and stuffing her into garbage bags before she dumped her out in the cold in a garbage can, leaving her to die so she could have fun with her boyfriend without a kid in tow. And he asked them to spare her life and give her life without parole. Yes, he really did. He effed up during his big long BS show. His baby killer, she's redeemable speech, and asked the jury to give her life without parole.
We have all, everybody in this room has failed in some way in their life. It may not have resulted in a criminal charge. It may not have resulted in going to prison. But we've done something. We've wanted compassion. We've wanted grace. We've wanted love. That's how you can end this. And that's how we can start to move on as a community. You're going to get a chance. Go back there and show her. You can tell her that she's redeemable. You can end it with grace and love. General Boswell told you about those mitigating factors. You'll get them in your jury instructions. Spare her life and give her life without parole. If there's anything good can come from this, is that we can all move forward, knowing that you got the verdict that you wanted, and you ended it with the emotion of love and compassion. That's what will be remembered.
So, I realized that a higher power got to him and made a fool out of him before I could. So, I just decided to let that one go. No lie, I probably couldn't have outdone that anyway. That was pretty darn good. He even had me siding with him for a minute there. But those media briefings weren't all that took place after the baby killer's verdict came in. Megan Boswell's attorney filed a motion right after the verdict for a new trial.
New information in the case of Megan Boswell, a Sullivan County woman found guilty of killing her 15-month-old daughter after a verdict was reached earlier this week.
We know now that Boswell was previously offered a plea deal. Boswell was found guilty of first-degree murder and 2 counts of felony murder, among over a dozen other counts in the trial.
However, Boswell's attorney did file a motion for a new trial after the guilty verdict. News Channel 11's Ansley Daniel reports on what this means going forward. Ansley?
Well, Sarah and Casey, Megan Boswell's defense attorney Gene Scott wasted no time to file that motion for a new trial. It was actually filed at 2:44 p.m. yesterday. That's almost immediately following the jury deciding to sentence Boswell for life in prison for finding her guilty of the 3 felony murder charges. Now, despite being found guilty on all 19 of the charges, Scott says that prosecutors didn't have enough evidence to support the convictions. Local defense attorney Chris Bird says that you have 30 days to ask for a new trial, and getting the ball rolling is a task in itself, as Scott will have to get the transcript of the 8-day trial along with some of the pre-trial hearings over the last 5 years.
He'll have to, try to hone in on exact things that he thinks fits his theory regarding there not being enough evidence in the case, there being some sort of grounds for mistrial, anything he can do to try to get Ms. Boswell a new trial, essentially. But this process will be a lengthy one. It won't be something that's going to be wrapped up anytime soon.
Scott also claims double jeopardy on the 11 counts of false reports, and Bird says the defendant loses the presumption of innocence in the appeals process, so it typically goes in the state's favor. Now, we learned today from both Scott and the district attorney's office that there were talks of a plea deal and even some offers made ahead of the trial. We weren't given any specifics on those, but they obviously never came to an agreement.
Which is cool and all. Except Megan doesn't have any more lies to sell. And she doesn't have anybody left to blame the death of her baby on. And, as her co-counsel already pointed out, clearly, they've established that Megan is a liar.
Clearly, they established that she's a liar, and I don't think anything she was going to say was going to be received by a jury or this community or anybody else, whether she said it in sincerity or not.
And yet, he volunteered to help defend her pro bono because he thinks she's redeemable. And as far as the defense saying the state didn't prove its case, I have to say, I don't know of too many reasons why it would be necessary to wrap aluminum foil and a blanket tightly around a toddler's head, and to wrap her in garbage bags and dump her head first down into a garbage can, unless your goal was to make it so that she couldn't breathe. But then again, I've never done it, so I'm no expert. I guess you'd have to ask the person whose fingerprints were on the aluminum foil and garbage can why it was necessary. But I wouldn't hold your breath waiting for the truth. Thank you for listening to me go on and on about how much I hate Megan Boswell. I appreciate it. And I hope she does get a new trial, so she can be found guilty again, so I can make another May Megan Boswell, the baby killer, rot in hell video. Stay safe out there. May precious baby Evelyn rest in peace. And I'll see you on my next video.